African leaders have in the last day or so held an urgent meeting after a spate of coups in the region. The talks held in the Guinean capital, Accra, come just a week after a coup in Burkina Faso, which became just the latest country to experience a military takeover in less than 2 years. Burkina Faso followed Mali, where a coup in September of 2020 was then followed by another in May of Burkina Faso could not have followed Mali because first came Mali, I should say, and then in May of last year, there was another coup, and then came another coup in Guinea towards the end of the year, and President Alpha Conde was ousted in Guinea in September. To talk more about this, we're joined tonight by the former Zambian Vice President, Dr. Sekwila Mumba. Dr. Mumba, very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So Ecowas, apart from the leaders of the region meeting on their own, has also been involved in what shall we say is shuttle diplomacy in Burkina Faso, trying to reach some sort of conclusion, a solution there. And the military says it is open to the beginning of a democratic process, but can it be trusted to return the country to democratic rule?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tembekele, for having me. What is happening in Burkina Faso should concern all African nations. Just to answer your immediate question, I think that we appreciate every effort that is being made by the Ecowas and now the AU, which is meeting in Ethiopia as we speak. However, one needs to understand that we are seeing a dysfunctional ECOWAS today. These are a reactionary organization that do not seem to have a plan in which to engage, especially West African countries, in dealing with the matters of security and also good governance in the area. These events of coups do not happen overnight. There's something that is brewing all the time. And I think ECOWAS must put in place a system of mitigating these problems before they actually happen. So we are dealing with dysfunctional bodies on the African continent, not even leaving out the African Union. And, I think that we need to interrogate that. We hope that the efforts that are being made by ECOWAS in trying to restore democracy and peace in Burkina Faso is going to yield fruit. But I want to remind you that Burkina Faso has a long history of military coups. Since independence, it has had about at least seven military coups. So it does have that background. And if it is not mitigated quick enough, it's contagious. It moves from one country to the other. The last 18 months, we have already seen 5 coups and attempted coups across the continent. And we must be worried as a continent. And I think that the African Union must stop being just a showcase of presidents who go there to have speeches given, pat each other on the back, but they must go there and roll back their sleeves like their friends do in the United States when they go to Camp David, take off their ties, take off their jackets, and bare their knuckles to challenge each other in issues of good governance, and challenging each other when they start to recognize one country is departing from the democratic norms and start to answer those questions before a coup takes place.
And is there a lack of that currently, and why?
Well, I think it's a failure of leadership amongst us. We must accept the fact that democracy is not necessarily a silver bullet that answers all the questions of security and good governance. It's just one aspect of governance. We must insist on sharing great, or rather ideas that are going to make our nation strong, things like strong institutions that are going to allow democracy to thrive. We have to ensure that security is constantly discussed amongst ourselves as nations. Now with all the presidents who would like to import, for instance, their presidential security from outside the country, from European nations. These are the units of security firms that actually help in toppling governments. So I think there are many aspects that are causing the problems we are facing now. Number one, the bodies across Africa, which is ECOWAS, SADC, East African Community, and AU as well. They are becoming more dysfunctional than they have ever been before. They need to start to engage the individual states well before these things happen. When they see early signs, they need to move in there and try to find a way in which to commit each other to good governance and challenge each other as presidents about what's happening in their individual countries. If we don't do this, this thing is going to spread like a wildfire across this continent. It's going to take us back to the dark ages where everybody feels they can take over government using unconstitutional means, and they'll still argue they have their sovereign right to do whatever they want in their own country.
There is also the view, sir, that containing this, as ECOWAS itself was saying, that events in Mali in 2020 have set off this contagion. Some are arguing that West Africa is well beyond that point because of just how quickly these coups have been able to multiply.
Correct. I think that we need to recognize that situation about West Africa and face it as it is. I think right now ECOWAS needs a lot of help. We are glad that African Union is meeting now. Our proposal to them is that don't spend too much time talking about things that do not matter right now. Let's go into security, because this thing is about to spill over, not just within ECOWAS. It's going to spill over into other areas of the continent if AU does not take this thing seriously. You know, we are living during a time when young people are very anxious about their lives, the issue of the promises that are made when people form governments, of providing jobs for the young people, improving the livelihoods of our people. And when that doesn't happen in the first year, there's always agitation today because of social media. People are reading about what others are doing in Burkina Faso, what other people are doing in Mali, in Chad, in Sudan, in Guinea. They are studying the fact that, look, if it's not working, why don't we do what our friends are doing across there? It is an emergency. It is an emergency that African Union does not just go there to read speeches. Let them take a session and look at the problem that has come to us. I hope that they don't leave Ethiopia without really dealing with this matter in a conclusive way. Where there is already a coup, the African Union, through their regional bodies, can move in and ensure that they reverse the status quo and bring back those countries on the path to true and equitable democracy.
And Dr. Mumba, it was also interesting to note after the ECOWAS meetings with the coup leaders, the military coup leaders in Burkina Faso this week, that a decision was taken not to impose sanctions. But you wonder about the wisdom of that call when you consider that in other countries in the region where meetings were held with coup leaders who made promises to lead a transition to democracy, those promises were not kept. So why not take the firmest line, including the imposition of sanctions?
Two things. First of all, the sanctions that they talk about are really, they don't mean anything. Toothless action, and coup leaders wouldn't care less about sanctions coming from, organizations like that. I think that the sanctions must be more biting. The sanctions must, be feared by those countries that go in that direction. So that's point number one. Point number two, we are all concerned at how, coup leaders are being treated with kids' gloves. I mean, unless the Constitution defines that the other option of taking over power is through a military coup, if it doesn't say that, you are dealing with people that have used illegal means to destabilize the country. Even if people on the streets celebrate, if it's done in the manner in which is unconstitutional, it becomes very difficult to stop such a trend. Therefore, I think AU, ECOWAS, SADC, East African community, we must make up our minds that wherever we find a coup, we deal with it as treason and make sure that those people are stopped and that situation reversed. So we must build capacity in the regional bodies. We must build capacity at the African Union level to be able to move in there and reverse the situation that has happened and start to put the country back on track towards democracy. Nothing will change if we deal with coup leaders with kids' gloves like they are a normal government. They are not a normal government. They're an illegal government coming in through illegal means. And if that is tolerated, I think that Africa will go back in its age, in the days of darkness where we used to have problem after problem with military coups.
In 30 seconds, if you can, Dr. Sekwila Mumba, what do you say to the view that African bodies, the AU, ECOWAS, and the rest of them, aren't as firm as they should be with people who take power by force, precisely because many of the leaders on the continent who are in public office aren't themselves the most virtuous when it comes to issues of democratic governance and leadership?
We must insist that these presidents who go to these meetings, whether it's SADC, Ecowas, or AU, are not just doing ceremonial things. The problems we are facing in Africa are not ceremonial problems. They are real life problems where lives are being lost, people are dying, countries are going backwards, economies are being demolished. These are real problems that are facing Africa. There's an example in our own region, in SADC, during the time of the late President Robert Mugabe. I mean, the whole of SADC knew that, Zimbabwe was going downward and the country was really facing problems. But anytime they met for SADC meetings, they patted each other on the back, patted President Robert Mugabe on the back. They could not sit him down and say, old man, big man, I think that we need to work together to ensure that there's restoration of democracy and the equity distribution of goods and services in your country, equitable distribution of goods and services. Nobody talked about that. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest problem we have are the presidents on the continent who are unwilling to challenge one another and demand of each other accountability to ensure that, these issues of coups are reduced, because they will not reduce as long as these presidents continue to use undemocratic means to govern their nations. So look at Europe. Right. The European Union, just to say that, please, the European Union is a coming together of nations that have agreed on a certain way in which they are going to deal with their problems. They hold each other accountable to those guidelines, and we must do the same.
I said it was my final question, but you mentioned Europe, so I have to come in there because there's still the constant wariness in Africa, isn't there, about the involvement of Europe, i.e. the former colonial powers, such as France. Has Africa been successful in keeping them at bay and making sure that they have no influence, no part in the overthrowing of governments?
That will continue as long as African presidents and governments continue to look to their colonial masters as the answers for the future of Africa, which I personally believe is not. I think we should run away from having those people having any sort of influence, because it's their interests they are going to come and push when they come here. When France comes in a country like Burkina Faso, they want to make sure the people that are in government are people that are totally on their side and doing what they want. And if the government that is there is elected by the people or the Burkinabe people, they are going to remove him and put somebody who supports what France wants. So let's keep away from this love of Europeans to come and govern our nations, either by bringing security wings or people that are going to guard under the guise of guarding the natural resources like our minerals. They bring their own security companies that, guard these multinational companies that are mining gold or diamonds in our African countries. It's these security companies that are contributing to the multiplied coups because they become so powerful. They have got equipment as good, even better, as our military. So we need to run away from this African concept that without the white people of Europe, we are unable to govern ourselves. The insecurity we are creating is as a result of filling our countries with international security companies that are running the affairs and the economy of our country. We need to answer this question.
Dr. Sekwila Mumba, former Vice President of Zambia, pleasure to have your time tonight, sir. Thank you very much.